Welcome, everybody, to our Chocolatey Software Product Spotlight live stream for April. Today, we're going to look at the recent beta release of Chocolatey products. We're going to talk about the progress we're making and what is coming up in the future. We're on 2 live streams every month, on the first and third Thursday. This live stream is where we spotlight Chocolatey products, recent releases, and important features. Our other live stream on the third Thursday of each month is our Chocolatey Community Coffee Break. And that's where we talk to members of the Chocolatey community, discuss how you can get involved and the recent changes that are going on. And the next community live stream is the 20th of April, so 2 weeks today, he says, looking at his calendar. You can watch out for our announcements of everything that we're doing, all the Chocolatey content, by joining us on Discord, subscribing to us on YouTube, or following us on Twitter, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitch, and probably anything else that we can find that will get to you guys and let you know what's going on with Chocolatey. You can find all the links for all of those social media services at the bottom of our commercial homepage, chocolatey.org. So my name is Paul Broadwith. I'm the Technical Engineering Manager here at Chocolatey Software, and I lead the engineering team that's responsible for all the products we're going to be talking about here today. My co-host is Ewan who'll be taking us through the technical aspects of today, including a demo. Gary, do you want to introduce yourself?
I can certainly try. So yes, my name is Ewan. I am a principal software engineer here at Chocolatey. That's a new title for me. That just happened.
I thought you'd forget.
No, I remembered. So that's happened just at the start of this month. So that was a nice promotion to get after being here at Chocolatey just over 5 years now. So I lead up, or I help. I help lead up the development.
And he's still trying to decide what it is he does now.
Yeah,
he's not sure.
I don't know what I'm doing. I just make things up. So yeah, I help lead the development team here at Chocolatey, working on all Chocolatey components, whether that's Chocolatey CLI all the way through to Chocolatey Central Management. So yeah, I'm hoping to be able to demo some of the things we've just released in the beta packages that we have.
Awesome. Okay, so remember today that we're going to be talking about pre-release software. So we're going to look at the Chocolatey beta release that was, when was that, Gary? It was last week. Yes, it was. It was last week. I'm getting all my dates mixed up. But as I said, it's pre-release software. So before you install any pre-release software, that includes the Chocolatey beta products and any other pre-release software that you come across, you should always read the release notes and find out what the known issues are before you install anything, because there are going to be bugs and things. There are going to be caveats. There are going to be known issues. There's going to be things that people are, going to tell you that you shouldn't do with their software, and we've done the same with our release notes. So have a look at those before you do anything. We would recommend that you don't install this in a production environment, and that before you install it anywhere, you take an export of all your packages and any backups that you feel that you need to. So that's our little get out of jail free card. But hopefully, if you've played with pre-release software before, that'll all be common sense to you, and it's stuff you've done before anyway. So I'm going to hand over to Gary now, who's going to take us through some of the changes that we've made to the product over in the last beta release, and then we're going to go and talk about some other things after that. So Gary, do you want to share your screen and take us through some magical technical stuffs?
I will certainly try. So just before we start, though, I guess maybe what we should make a distinction between. So Paul's absolutely correct in the sense that we are still in a pre-release version of Chocolatey and all of its components. But the slight difference from where we were in the previous pre-release version to a beta version. So the first question might be, what's the difference between alpha and beta? So for us, because it's one of these things that different people have different understanding of what that means. But for us, the alpha versions were very, very much subject to change. We might have added things, we might have removed things, we might have changed things around. So anyone who was taking a direct dependency on Chocolatey, maybe for creating their own components, etc., it was very much expected to be a state of flux. But we've now jumped to a beta version. So what that means is we're getting very much closer to a final release. So there's not going to be as much churn for want of a better word. We're not expecting there's going to be any major removal of items. We're not going to expect suddenly have lots of things getting added in. We try to get to a point in this beta release where all the things that we're going to change have been changed. And the idea is, with it still being in a beta, is that we've got that opportunity to test it out, refine it, make sure it's all working the way we expect it to, etc. So that's kind of just a very quick overview between the change from alpha to the beta releases. So as Paul said, a lot of that is captured in our release notes. So that's kind of where I'm going to start. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here. So Paul, if you can just let me know if you can see that, okay?
Yeah, I can see it, Gary.
Okay, perfect. So in the release notes, so it's the beta version, which is 2023-03-21. Love my date in my version number there. But what you'll see straight away is that in this release, we've added quite a significant number of breaking changes. I'll maybe just make this a little bit bigger so that everyone can see. If I can do that on my VM here. So we've taken the opportunity to say that we've added in a lot of breaking changes into this beta release, but unless something's gone horribly wrong, there shouldn't be any more breaking changes in subsequent beta releases and ultimately to the final released version of Chocolatey CLI. So that's kind of where I wanted to start. So my intention, Paul, was to quickly rattle through some of these breaking changes, talk about what they are, maybe show them in action, and then take any questions that come from either yourself or from the folks watching the stream, and go from there. So let's just start at the beginning. So what have we got here? So Choco config list should only include information about config. I personally love this change. It's been a bugbear of mine for a little bit. But previously, if you were to go up to Chocolatey, so I should take a step back. On this machine, I have the beta version of Chocolatey installed. I have a business license installed, so I've also got the Chocolatey license extension installed, and I've also got Chocolatey GUI and its license extension installed. So that's the one that I'm talking about just now. So previously, if I were to go up and ask for what sources do I have, I could do Choco source list, and it would list out all of the sources that are on my machine. If I were to walk up and say Choco API key list, then it would list out all the API keys that I don't have any on my machine, but it would list out all of the API keys. And if I did a Choco feature list, it will, funnily enough, it'll list out all of the features and whether they are enabled or disabled. But if I walked up and said Choco config list, then previously it would have listed out sources, API keys, features, and configs. It would have listed everything. So the change that we've made, although it's slightly hard to see in my kind of blown up text that I've got on this screen, Choco config list now only lists out the configs and their current values. So we thought that this was an opportunity, since it's a breaking change, to make the output of those commands more consistent and more so you can depend on them and understand what they're coming back with. So Choco config list, Choco API key list, Choco source list, and Choco feature list now list out only those portions of pieces of information. So I personally really like that change, and I think it makes a lot of sense. The next one for me, it's a big bugbear of mine as well. But let's imagine you had an API key. So we could do Choco API key add name, I think it's name, and key is, obviously this won't work, it's not a valid API key, but Choco API key, I'm going to need some help here. I can't remember what let's go to the help. I will look at my commands. So where's the example? It is add, it's S and K, not N. Apologies. I was so close. So if I change that to an S, if I had an API key, so now that I've got an API key in my system, I can do Choco API key list. It will list out that API key. And if I wanted to remove that API key, I would have to do previously I would have had to do Choco API key -S bob -- remove. That's how you would have had to do it in the older version of Chocolatey. Now that was contrary to how you would do a removal of a source or removal of another piece of information from Chocolatey. You wouldn't use the -- remove option. You would use the remove sub command. So we take an opportunity again in this breaking change to say we're now going to have a sub command called remove, so it's more consistent with the other portions of Chocolatey. So again, for me, part of this 2.0 release is about standardizing across the Chocolatey API, the surface, the user interface, if you like, of Chocolatey, making that more standard across the board. Okay. The next one on the list, this one is one we've advertised quite a bit in the past, but the API, the web API, the web PI alternative source has been removed now. So what was that? So previously in Chocolatey, you would have been able to do choco install something -- source web PI, and using the web platform installer, web PI is a web platform installer for Microsoft, it would have went off and tried to find a piece of functionality, a piece of software with that command, with that package name from that web PI alternative source. But that source has now been removed. The reason it was removed is because the web PI platform in its entirety has been deprecated by Microsoft now. It doesn't exist anymore. So the support for it within Chocolatey now no longer exists. So what you'll see if you try that is the path to something web PI for the selected source could not be resolved. Because what it's attempting to do, we've removed the special handling for the web PI source, and now it's just trying to find a folder or a source declared with that name, and that doesn't exist anymore. So that's what that one was about, that breaking change there. This one I can't really show because this is more of a code change, underlying code change, but we rename or migrate away from the custom hashcode class. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds on this one, but effectively in .NET 4.8, the base class library that is .NET comes with its own built-in hashcode class. So rather than having our own custom implementation of that, because we were still on .NET 4.0, we've now moved to the official one from Microsoft. So that's all that one was. Similar to this one, I'm not really good digging into this one, but in previous versions of Chocolatey, we were using the RX extension packages. So that's the reactive extensions NuGet packages. Those packages are slightly older, and they have since been renamed to the system.reactive packages. So it's exact same functionality, and we use it across Chocolatey components. So we've moved from the RX packages to the system reactive packages. That should cause no, to an end user, it doesn't cause any difference. But if you have pulled in chocolatey.lib into your own custom application, you will also have to update to the system reactive packages as well. This one, bones of contention potentially for some folks, but we have spoken around this for a while now, but we have now fully removed the support for side-by-side installs. So if you were to go and attempt to do choco install, that won't work. If you were to attempt to do I'm going to stop talking. Choco install Bob dash SXS.
Yeah,
that option is not there anymore. It won't actually find a Bob package either, funnily enough. But the side-by-side option is no longer there, and the ability to install two different versions of a package in a side-by-side format, we've completely removed that. So along with that, obviously, all of the warning messages that we were emitting in the previous releases, all of those have been removed in favor of simply not supporting it. I'm not going to dig into the details of why that's removed. We've discussed that to death in other streams. If you do have questions, ask and we can go over it, but I'm not going to go into it in any more detail than that just now. This was an interesting one, fixing a spelling mistake. Why is that a breaking change, Gary? Well, funny story. It turns out that one of our functions had a spelling mistake in one of the parameters that went into it. So in a previous release of Chocolatey, a community member came along and fixed more spelling mistakes than I would care to admit to us having across our code base, but a lot of them changed. And in that PR, they also took the opportunity to rename that parameter name. That broke a bunch of stuff because it broke the contract that was defined between those public methods. So we stripped that spelling mistake out of that PR and then moved it into this release with, so it is a breaking change. So again, if you happen to be using that method, you're no longer going to have a parameter called with the spelling. I can't remember what it was. It was throw error or something. There was an R missing from the parameter name. So we fixed it, but we had to do it under a breaking change. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. This one, remove deprecated chocolatey shims. Again, some people love them, some people don't. I was nonplussed about them, but rather than typing out Choco install, previously you would have been able to do cinst. So it's a shortcut or a shorthand for Choco install. And that was made possible because of the fact that we had added shims with those names into the Chocolatey folder on disk. So what we've done now in this release is those shims are no longer there. So if you go and look in the Chocolatey folder and look in the bin folder, not the bin folder, yes, the bin folder, you'll see that there's still a shim for Choco, and there's our shims for Chocolatey GUI because I've already installed that, but there's no longer shims for C-list, C-inst, C-uninst, and all the other ones. We've effectively removed them all. We've signaled that for a long time as well. So again, you might ask, why are you doing that? From our point of view, the entry point for Chocolatey is the Choco command, so the ubiquitous Choco command, rather than the shortcuts that were previously available. But the more specific reason is that we had a cpack shim, and if you had cmake installed or make installed, then the cpack shim or executable that they had broke if you also had Chocolatey installed, because our shim ended up being ahead of it in the path that Windows uses. So we removed the cpack one because we didn't want to break other software that might also be installed on the machine. And when we made that decision, we also said, look, it's just easier to have Choco being the entry point for everything. So that was that one. Okay.
Gary, just on that one as well, that some people have said, oh, I use those. But in PowerShell, you can create aliases for those commands if you want to. So while we've removed them, that doesn't mean you can't put them back. Or should I say, not put the shims back, but put the aliases back.
That's not what I want to do, is it? It's get help new alias. I did that the wrong way around, isn't it? Get help new alias. There we go. No, I don't want to do that. No, let's not do that. Never mind. New machine doesn't have the help installed. So yes, absolutely. So if you really are tied to those, or you have lots of scripts that use them, there are mechanisms that you can put in place to put those aliases or shims back in place. And I wouldn't be surprised if someone doesn't create a Chocolatey package at some point that does that for folks. We're not planning on doing that because for us, again, the entry point for Chocolatey is Choco. Okay. Remove deprecated configurations from config. This shouldn't impact anyone, hopefully, but we are treating it as a breaking change. So in the chocolatey.config file, I don't actually have a reasonable text header on the machine, but in the chocolatey.config file, there were some older, I can't actually install it. I can't even open it up. There were some older top level elements within the chocolatey.config file that have subsequently been moved into the config section. So they were left there for historical reasons, but again, because of this breaking change or this major release rather, we've taken the opportunity to remove those from the config file. Again, they shouldn't impact you in their usage, because Chocolatey eventually will rewrite the config file as and when it needs to, with the absence of those elements in that chocolatey.config file. Remove the default push location when uploading and pushing packages. Okay, so what's this one about? So I'm not going to do this because I'll end up pushing a package to somewhere I don't actually want it to. But if you had a package, I don't have one here, so let's just do bob.nupkeg. If you just type that command, so choco push bob.nupkeg, by default, it would have went to the Chocolatey community repository, because that was the default push location. And for most folks, that's absolutely fine, because CCR or Chocolate Community Repository is ultimately most likely where they want those packages to go. But for internal customers or organizational customers are using Chocolatey, that can cause problems because, well, they might end up pushing one of their internal applications or internal packages to CCR when they didn't mean to. And we've had that happen. Now there are ways and means around that, obviously, because you can be much more specific about where you want that package to be pushed using the -- source. So what we've done is we've added a new configuration that is what is the default push location. So by that, what you can do there is you can specify through configuration that by default, you want your packages to be pushed to here. So if you are happy with the old way of doing things and having the default being CCR, you can absolutely use a chococonfig command to set that default push location to be push.chocolatey.org, and you'll be back to where you were. But by default, out of the box, the default push location has been removed now. Okay. Next one, remove get bin root Chocolatey helper function. This has been on the to-do list for a long time, but the Chocolatey get bin root helper function was a poorly, I think it's fair to say it was a poorly named commandlet. It didn't express what it was doing, and it's been replaced with the get tools location commandlet. That's the one that you want to use because ultimately it gets you the tools folder for where your package is installing to, rather than bin root, which wasn't particularly descriptive. No, I said that wrong. Get tools location is C tools by default, not the tools folder for the package. It's the top level tools folder at the machine level. Say again, still confused, right? But the get bin root was a poorly named one, and it's been deprecated for a while, but we have taken the opportunity to remove that from in this beta release of Chocolatey. Right. Choco config list -- limit output does not output what is expected. Okay, so kind of related to what I spoke about before. Let's get rid of this one. So we've improved the Choco config list to now only list the configs that are available on the machine, but we went a little bit further, and if you use the limit output or the -r, I could have typed and saved myself some type in there, it will now correctly format that in a machine readable format, because previously what it would do is it wouldn't respect, again, it's hard to see because of the size of the description and my big text here, but effectively what it's doing is now cache location, pipe, and then the value, pipe, and then the description. Whereas previously with the -r or the -- limit output, it wouldn't respect that format. So it wasn't particularly machine readable. So what we've done is we've changed that. And again, that's a breaking change because some folks might have worked around it not working as expected and parsing it in a way that they could make it work. But now it's much closer to what you would get from the output of, say, Choco. Let's use a shorter one. I was going to do feature list, but let's do source list. Source list, it's just very, very similar in the sense that there's a pipe there in terms of each delimiting part of what's being output. That's that one. And the final one, which is probably one of the biggest ones that folks have asked us for, is we're changing the default behavior of Choco list to be local only. So what does that mean? Now, prior to this release of Chocolatey, if you did a Choco list, it would run off to all the sources that you have configured, and it would list out every single package that's available. So if you did Choco list and you had CCR or Chocolate Community Repository as a source, it would start enumerating through the 9,000 odd packages that are there. It's not a particularly useful output, especially if you didn't expect it. So Choco list now will only enumerate and show what packages I currently have installed on my machine. So that's much more closer to other package managers and how they work, and it's much more the expected output. Now, what we have done in order to support or to help other systems that are integrating with Chocolatey, we have left the local only parameter there, so it knows about it, but it will continue to warn about it. So we're not going to break anyone, and it will continue to work as expected. And I think I'm right in saying if I were to do a -R here, we wouldn't see that warning. No, we left that in there as well because we do want folks to move away from it. But it's a much closer to the output, and you can just jump over those lines if you are still parsing it. So we're not breaking anyone, because if we hadn't have done that, it would have done Choco list, and then it would have taken local only as the package name. So we are still making things work, but we are wanting folks to move away from that to just a straight up Choco list command. But if you really wanted to list out all of the packages from all of the sources that you've got configured, you can still do that with the Choco search command or the Choco find command. I'm not going to do that now because, again, it's going to go through all the packages, but it is still there if that is functionality that you want. Okay. Couple of enhancements to talk about. The first one there is the ability to specify a default source when doing Choco pushes. So I've kind of already spoken about that, but effectively, because we removed the default push location, we needed to provide a mechanism to set what you want that default push location to be. So that's done via the Choco config command. So you can do Choco config set. I forget what the name is off the top of my head. I think it is just default push location, but you can set that to be whatever URL you want it to be now. And the final one, we've listed it as an enhancement, but it's because it's not strictly a breaking change, but we are enhancing the code base. So if you cast your mind back, Paul, to when we did the 1.0 release of Chocolatey, we quite quickly turned around and did a 1.0.1 release because we broke a few things that wasn't necessarily expected. So what we had to do, or what we did in that release, the 1.0.0 release, was we removed the Choco version and the Choco update commands because they had previously been marked as deprecated, and we removed them. In doing that, we broke Chocolatey licensed extension because it kind of still expected there to be a Chocolatey version command and a Chocolatey update command. So in 0.1.0, we promptly put those commands back in again, but with no implementation. So they were still there, but they didn't do anything. So in this release, this new major release of Chocolatey, we've said it's actually time for those to be completely removed now. So we've now re-removed the Choco version and the Choco update command. They're no longer, they're definitely not there anymore, because if I go back up to here and do Choco version, it should tell me that there's no command registered with Choco version. There we go. Now, it would have said that in 1.0.1, but it was a lie because the command was still there. It just output that text. Now that command's definitely not there. So that's what we did. That's why we did it. Whew, there's lots of words in there, Paul. I think those were the highlights of the CLI release. We also had.
Oh, was one thing I was going to pick up on, Gary. It was removing the deprecated Chocolatey shims. Corbob has pointed out in the chat that you can't use get alias. Sorry, you can't have an alias for it. When I was talking about aliases, I was talking about having the commands themselves, not the actual alias as in the new alias. So if you use new alias in PowerShell, it will swap one command for another. But what you're doing there really is you're swapping cinst for Choco install, which is not a command. So you could have cinst for Choco, if you see what I mean. But no, so what you have to do is you need to write a function. And the function would be called cinst, and it would take the the input from whatever you put on the command line to Choco install and have that suffix onto the end of it. So that's what you would do there. So I just wanted to point that out, but thanks to Corbob for pointing that out.
That's a good point, Barry. I mean, that's just my lack of knowledge of PowerShell shining through. And
that is why we don't let Gary, as Stevie Coaster said in the chat, we don't let Gary write PowerShell. And that is precisely the reason. You've demonstrated that live on the stream. The other thing that Corey has said is that the warning lines for the previous command you typed in, which one was it? The one with the purple text. I've totally forgotten what the command was. Yes, that one. So you could filter them out that way. If you use something like convert from CSV, you can just check if the version is null and filter out like that. We'll probably amend the text for that as well. But yeah, it will still output, because, as you said, we want people to move away from it, because it will be removed at a later version. We've only left it in because some people said it would probably break some things for them, despite us deprecating it and now going to remove it. So that's what we do. We deprecate something for a while, then we remove it. And for example, in the version 2, a major version where it's a break and change, we remove it in that. So ordinarily we would just remove this. But as I said, some people have asked us to kind of leave it in, so we've switched off the functionality for that local only option, but it doesn't produce an error saying, hey, it doesn't exist. It just ignores it, as we've got in the text there.
I mean, we can kind of show what. So if I were to do choco list Bob, so if Bob was the list only command or the list only option, it would take that as the package name being searched for. So that I have no package called Bob, and it's going to return 0 packages. Whereas choco list local only is no longer being treated as a package name, and instead it's being ignored to return a flat list of all the packages. So if we hadn't done what we did, we would have potentially broken things like the Chocolatey PowerShell module, or I forget the name of it, but there was another system that's very similar that they specifically reached out to us. I think it was on the Discord server. They reached out to us and said, what's going to happen here, because this is going to break my usage of Chocolatey. So we've tried our very best here. I like to think we've gone above and beyond what other folks might, or other applications, other systems might have done. We're very cognizant of the fact that folks do take a dependency on Chocolatey, and we do try our best to signal that these things are happening, so that when they do happen, it's not a surprise. But obviously, there's only so much we can do.
Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah, it was in GitHub. I remember it. So, but yeah.
Yes. So in addition to the CLI release, we've also released beta versions of the other 4 main Chocolatey components. So Chocolatey license extension, Chocolatey GUI license extension, and Chocolatey agent. Some of them didn't have as many changes, because really it was just a case of bringing them up to date with where we are with the Chocolatey CLI release. But I was planning on just going through the top level release notes for there as well. So for Chocolatey GUI, the only thing that we did, it is still a breaking change, is we've removed support for side-by-side installs. So what I mean by that is, if I were to go and look at Chocolatey GUI, in the current version of Chocolatey GUI, if you go to a package, then you have the option of doing an advanced installation. And that advanced installation pops up a modal window where you can say, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do that. And one of those options was install in side-by-side mode. So we had to remove that functionality as well. So we've treated that as a breaking change in Chocolatey GUI, because that's a change to the user interface. And now obviously my internet is taking a while at the minute. So eventually I'll get a list of packages to show you there. And I'll be able to bring up the advanced installation dialog. But again, it's a small change in the sense that so if I go into here and I go into the install advanced, then previously one of these options, I forget what it was, it might have been under advanced options. One of these was allow side by side, and you would have ticked it on, and then that would have sent that option through to the underlying command to do that as part of the installation. We've removed that now. You can't do that anymore. Okay, so that was the only change in Chocolatey GUI from in the beta release. For Chocolatey license extension, let's have a look at the release notes. We might come back to 5.02 and what we did there, because that was after the beta release. We then released an official version. But the breaking changes in the beta release of Chocolatey license extension. So in the same way that we moved away from the uses of our custom hashcode class in CLI, we also had the same change to make in Chocolatey license extension. Again, we've removed the support for side-by-side installations. You can't do that via the license extension either anymore. And because of the way that Chocolatey re-implements certain things and provide additional functionality for certain commands, we also had to change the default behavior of the Chocolist command in Chocolatey license extension. Similarly, because of that breaking change in Chocolatey, where we fixed the renaming of that function or the parameter into that function, we then immediately broke Chocolatey license extension because it was a breaking change, and Chocolatey license extension takes a dependency on Chocolatey. So that's why we had to fix the bug that was there and handle the removal of deprecated configurations. Again, the breaking change that we introduced in Chocolatey CLI, where we removed the deprecated configurations, caused a bug in Chocolatey license extension because it was still expecting it to be there. So swings and roundabouts, as we, even internally, when we have breaking changes in Chocolatey CLI, we have to account for those in the dependent packages that we have.
Something you said, Gary, is that we would jump back to 5.02, but what the words you used there was official version, kind of suggesting that the beta versions are not official, but actually, I think what you meant is stable and pre-release.
That was a poor choice of words. Yes. So maybe we just go through that while we're here. What we found was that during the working on the beta and getting things ready, we noticed that there was a couple of our dependencies that had CVEs associated with them. So LightDB had a CVE as well as NewtonSoft.json. So we took the opportunity let me start again. We'd already bumped these versions of these packages in the beta release. The reason that we did that is because we've gone from support for .NET Framework 4.0. We've gone from supporting .NET Framework 4.0 to .NET Framework 4.8. So in uplifting to .NET Framework 4.8, we'd already bumped these because, well, there were newer versions available for the later .NET Framework. But what we found was that there was CVEs on the versions that we had in the stable, thank you, Paul, version of Chocolatey license extension. So we took the opportunity to release 5.02 to bump both of those. Now, we don't think there was a malicious actor would have had to do a lot of things, including most likely having essentially root access to a machine in order to do anything with those vulnerabilities. But we did take the opportunity, as we always do, to make sure that we are using the most up-to-date versions of those dependencies as we can. So that's why we shipped a 5.02 version. And that was, the Rain was busy on the team doing that while we were working on the beta release. Chocolatey GUI license extension. So again, it also has a beta. There was no additional changes from the previous alpha releases in Chocolatey GUI license extension. But what we did do is we brought it up to use the latest packages in the same way that we did previously. And the final component that I don't have installed on this machine, so I can't show any of these if there are anything to be shown in here. This beta release was so in the same way that we moved, or we switched over from using the RX packages to the system.reactive packages, we did the same thing in Chocolatey Agent because it also makes use of those reactive extensions. And again, in the same way that we had to handle the removal of those deprecated configurations, we've also taken the opportunity to fix those in Chocolatey Agent as well. So those were the 5 releases that we did. And it's, as I've shown, it's all working on my machine. Fingers crossed, everything's working. And I guess the only thing to show is, I can't remember if we showed this before, or did we? So this is Chocolatey GUI consuming packages from a v3 feed, something that was never possible before, but this imaginatively entitled source that I've called v3 is a v3 feed that I have on feeds.io, and I've just pushed a couple of packages up there just for showing what's there. And Chocolatey GUI is now showing those packages ready for installation, uninstallation, upgrade, etc. So yeah, it's all working. Any questions from the audience, Paul?
There's no questions so far in the chat, but I was sent a couple of questions. One came in through Twitter during the week. I'm just going to try and find it. and there was another one come in. I think it was Discord. Let me see. Yeah, there's a question. I put them. I was looking for them in my. I've got a text file with the questions in it. Yeah, the first one is and it's actually timely because you just talked about V3 there. So the first question that somebody asked was, we're talking. We talk a lot about we're adding Nougat V3, support, those feed support. So what does it actually give people? If, over and above, if they're using Chocolatey right now today, okay, and they're running V2 feeds, Nougat V2 feeds, it's all working for them. What does adding Nougat V3 feeds really let them do that they can't do now?
So if they only have V2 feeds and they're happy with the V2 feeds, short answer is this new version of Chocolatey, over and above kind of security concerns, because we're uplifting to new versions of .NET Framework, we're uplifting versions of packages, etc. One of the things that they are going to get is the underlying NuGet client assemblies that we have now taken a dependency on have got significant improvements when it comes to caching of results and optimizations of looking for packages, etc. So they should hopefully see a speed improvement. And we've also, as a result of uplifting to the new NuGet client libraries, we have fixed some of the longer standing bugs with regard to dependency resolution. So what I mean by that is if package A has a dependency on package B, but maybe within a specific version range, depending on what you've got already, what packages you already had installed, there were some known kind of odd cases where an installation of a package might result in not the expected version of the dependency being installed. It might grab the lower version of a package dependency rather than the kind of the expected higher version. So some of those nuanced issues have also been fixed because they've been fixed in the upstream NuGet client library. So the main thing for anyone who's just got a V2 feed, they're getting a more up-to-date base class library in terms of the .NET Framework, updated dependencies and all the stuff that goes with that. Hopefully some speed improvements and the ability at some point, now we're not doing that in this release, but having uplifted to the new NuGet client libraries, we will have the ability to start adding in some other functionality that NuGet brings with it. So things like it was spoken about recently, for example, support for different authentication mechanisms to feeds. We currently don't support certain personal access tokens, for example, for when accessing a NuGet feed. Because we have uplifted to the new NuGet client library, things like we open the door for providing that functionality. Now, we're not providing that in this release because this release is more about let's just get to a point where everything that was working continues to work, but better, and also provide support for V3 feeds. And then in subsequent 2.x releases, we'll potentially bring in some of that other functionality that is now on the table as well. So hopefully that makes sense.
No, it does. But something I was going to add to it, but before I do that, Stevie Coaster has said in the chat the V3 is faster to retrieve packages from in his testing, as opposed to a V2 feed. So if you're going to switch to a V3 feed, it is faster to be used with Chocolatey CLI.
Yeah. So,
but
the first part that I was saying there, just to clarify that as well, what I was saying was in terms of if you're continuing to use a V2 feed and you're happy to use a V2 feed, then you will hopefully see an overall speed improvement as well. But yeah, Stevie's absolutely right. If you do have a V3 feed, just because of the way it works, where it's throwing JSON around rather than doing OData queries, the V3 feed is just faster than a V2 equivalent. Yes. So if you can uplift and change to a V3 feed, that would probably be our recommendation. And
Stevie's stole a little bit of my thunder there in the chat, because I was going to go on to say that one of the other things that you get with V3 feed support, and obviously the newer versions of Chocolatey, is that a lot of repository managers are looking to deprecate version 2 feeds. the most popular ones that our customers use is Sonatype Nexus and Artifactory. I'm not going to say whether they're deprecating them, whether they've announced it or not, but I know that a lot of repository managers are looking to deprecate it because the V2 feeds have been around for a very long time. And as I said, you've got newer ones coming out. Stevie's mentioned in the chat there about GitHub. We've got Azure DevOps feeds as well, artifacts feeds. That's V3, although you can use a V2 with it, but it's not quite as straightforward as using V3. I think GitLab might be V3 as well. I don't want to swear to that. I'm not entirely sure. And there's probably a lot of other ones as well. And you can certainly get with Sonatype Nexus and Artifactory support V3 already. So it's not like, you have to wait for them to deprecate that in order to move. You can actually move now. And in case of Nexus anyway, we know that it's fairly transparent. You can have a V2 and a V3 feed sitting on the same feed effectively. Yep. You don't have to, reinvent the wheel there. I'm not sure about Artifactory. Maybe it's the same with that. So with Chocolatey, the new version of Chocolatey CLI, you've been able to use more modern versions of these feeds, which is V3, that a lot of the repository managers currently support, and a lot of the repository managers are going to deprecate V2 anyway. So you're getting that possibility to move with the times with the repository managers as well.
The other thing to say on that as well, as we found out as some of the folks that are using were using the alpha version, is that some repository managers are V3 only. So we inadvertently, between alpha releases, and again, that's why we try to do that kind of work in alpha releases as opposed to beta releases. Between the two alpha versions that we released, we actually broke it so that a V3 only repository server was working, and then it stopped working. And we addressed that issue, but that was, I think, Baguette and Sleet. Both of those only provide a V3 feed. So depending on what you're using, Chocolatey is now an option where it might not have been before if you do go to this 2.0 release that's coming out.
And I wanted to say that they're kind of niche repository managers, but then I didn't want to be disrespectful because they're niche to us because we've never heard of them before that issue was raised. So maybe they're really widely used and it's not maybe something that's used by our customers, but it seems to be they're not as popular, I think it's fair to say, as like the Nexus, the Artifactory, ProGet, that kind of thing. But certainly, as you said, it now works with those, and it's good to hear about a repository manager that might be not as widely used, that we want to make sure Chocolatey works with as many different repository managers as possible. So yeah, it's good to hear about that, and especially that the fix was fairly straightforward, I believe, to actually get
the other interesting one as well for someone that reported an issue was that they didn't actually have a repository manager. They had a handcrafted JSON file in a GitHub repository that was the entry point for their packages, and it just had kind of essentially hard-coded, there's my package over there. Now, we broke that person who was doing that with that alpha release, but we've now fixed them again. So Chocolatey this version of Chocolatey now also supports those handcrafted repository servers. Now, quite why you would want to do that, I can't speak to that, but it now does work for those two.
As Stevie's commented in the chat there as well, we're talking about Artifactory and the fact that Nexus, the V2 and the V3 feed is in the same repository from a Nexus point of view. You don't have to create a whole new feed for it. But he said that Artifactory URLs are different between V2 and V3. But with Nexus, you just use add the /index.json to the end of the URL, as we were talking about. So they work slightly differently, but that might be for good reason. And if you use those products, you'll probably know about that already. We're coming up to time. We've got 10 minutes left. Gary, is there anything else you want to kind of talk about or go over? I've got one more question, but I wanted to make sure you got everything out the way that you wanted to talk about first.
I guess the only thing to say, so in terms of what's coming next, there's going to be at least, or there's going to be some more beta package releases. But what we've got left, anyone can follow along with this. Maybe just to mention this, I'm not signed in, but we could go to Chocolatey Choco, and there is a 2.0 milestone on GitHub. And what's left against that milestone are we addressed all of the breaking changes, and that's what we made sure to get into this first beta release.
Would you make that a little bigger, Gary?
I will once I've clicked on the So let's see if I can go in here. It's my machine's thinking, oh, I went far too far. 400%. Is that big enough for your eyes, Paul? There we go.
That's good.
So in the 2.0 milestone, there's still 14 open issues, but you'll notice that none of those are breaking changes. So what's left are the slightly new features that are coming in or enhancements to existing functionality. And a lot of that, I don't want to say all of it, but a lot of that is, again, what I refer to as just making the API or the user interface of Chocolatey consistent across some of the way that other things work. So for example, this one, being able to select a feature rather than doing a Choco feature list to see all of the features, this PR or this issue is about being able to select one feature and get whether it's enabled or disabled. Now you can do that for a config value. You can do Choco config get, but you can't do a Choco feature get. So again, bringing consistency in verb usage for those is important to get a consistent solid base. And the other one that I think is going to be a much sought after one is that Choco feature list is now going to be in alphabetical order. So rather than having to hunt through the Choco feature list for a specifically named feature, you'll be able to see them all in alphabetical order. So those are, we didn't need to get those ones into this first beta release because they're non-breaking changes. They're just slight changes to the output and how things can work, but we don't envision that they're going to break anyone. So that's what's left in the upcoming milestone. So you'll see those starting to get knocked off. One of those in particular for me is important because I wrote it. This one here, this is my issue and I've got a PR for it. So that will allow me eventually. So if I do Choco install, no, Choco install -H, I'll be able to do -- online, which will open up the help information for that install command, but on the website rather than listing it out on the command line. So it's similar to what you can do in PowerShell, but we'll be adding the -- online option to the help command so that you can get that help on a browser rather than in the. So I'm excited about that one, mainly because it's I wrote that. That's all me. It's like 4 lines of code, but I'm claiming those 4 lines of code because they're mine. So it's all good.
Cool. You probably hear my dogs going insane in the background, but hopefully not. But yeah, so I just wanted to kind of bring up the last question, Gary. We've got 6 minutes left. And the question was, and this was the one that was sent to me by Discord, although alpha and beta versions have had the Intune support removed. So for people that don't know, Chocolatey has support for Intune, where you can convert Chocolatey packages to Intune Win files, Intune Win packages, if you want to call it that, and then upload those or push those packages up into your Intune tenant. We've removed that from the alpha and beta versions. It was still behind a preview flag for kind of Chocolatey stable, but we removed that for good reasons. But the question was really, does this mean that Chocolatey CLI will no longer support Intune?
So the answer is that, well, how do I answer that without a negative? So going forward, Chocolatey license extension will continue to support Intune. Yes. The reason, so it kind of contradicts what I said before. And what I said before was in these beta releases, we wanted to get all the functionality in and released so that there's no surprises. Now, I've kind of broken that by saying in this beta release, Intune support is still not available. It was a hard one. We talked it through a lot. We've had multiple discussions about this, Paul. But effectively, what it came down to is due to the fact that Intune is still a preview feature, i.e. you have to opt in to switching it on in the first place. The fact that it's not there in the beta release shouldn't be a surprise because you have to opt into the usage of it anyway. So in a future beta release, we will be adding the Intune support back in again. There's been issues, let's put it that way. There's been quite a bit of code churn, quite a bit of renaming, refactoring, etc. That's meant that the Intune support hasn't been able to get in in the timescale that we wanted. But in a future beta release, we will be adding that back in. And at that point, it should function the exact same way as it did before, but it will be taking advantage of the new NuGet assemblies in the same way that other parts of Chocolatey have as well. So it's not going away. It's still going to be there. It's just that we weren't quite able to get it in this release. But when so the reason I brought this up is this discussion is where I'm trying to capture all of the information about what is and what's not included in each of the releases. So where I've had to, for each of the alpha and beta releases of Chocolatey licensing extensions, say in this release version of Intune support is not available, I'm hoping that in the next one I'll be able to put a line through that and say it's now available, it's now supported. So if you haven't seen this discussion and you're interested in what is and what's not been included, I definitely ask you, or I definitely recommend that you check it out, because this is where we're collecting any known issues. So the likes of the cake is a lie brought up an issue back in February that we fixed. Then this was the one that was regarding v3 only feed. So this is where we're capturing any of the known issues that are cropping up with folks using the alpha or beta releases. So if you do run into anything, this is where to go to find out information, and also to find out what is and what isn't included and what's been fixed. So hopefully that answers that question as well, Paul.
No, it does. And I think just to reiterate that, you know, implementing the NuGet version 3 client assemblies is a fundamental change in the way that internally the code, you know, the code base was. And we need to make sure that the way Chocolatey worked before NuGet v3 was implemented works exactly the same way it does afterwards. So when you're changing that much inside, you need to make sure that that happens. And something like Intune, which is part of our Chocolatey licensed product, Chocolatey for Business, and we recommend that people don't use the alpha and beta in production systems. It kind of felt it was right as well to take that out. You know, it wasn't such a bad decision because of that, because the people that were using it, we asked not to use it in production anyway, if you see what I mean. So once, as Gary said, it will be coming back, and it will be in the final release, you know, of Chocolatey CLI version 2 and Chocolatey license extension version 6, etc. So it will be making its way back. What was it? Yeah, so that's kind of, you know, what we're looking at. We're aiming to have this released soon. So this isn't going to, you know, what we don't do at Chocolatey is we don't tend to put dates on things so much, because if you've been involved in software development at all for any part of your life, you'll know that dates slip all over the place. And if we promise it in a particular date, it doesn't happen, people get disappointed. So what we can say is that we're entering the end phase, the last chapter, whatever you want to call it, of our NuGet v3 and .NET 4.8 implementation. So this will actually be released soon, but we're looking to release another beta very soon as well, to get additional functionality out there. So I think we're actually just at time, Gary. Have you got anything else you want to just mention before we finish?
Can I mention what Steph did, just because we're here?
Yeah.
Can I?
No, I think that's good. That's good.
Steph has been busy. So anyone that's used our search box up at the top here or uses it, they will notice that it's changed. So Algolia is the search index crawler that we make use of to make finding things on our documentation site easier. I think it's fair to say that in the previous version, it stopped being as useful as it was before, but now that's all changed. So we've now updated to the new version of Algolia search. So for example, when we added hooks into Chocolatey, we added a page for it in our documentation, but you couldn't find that in the search box. Now you can. So hooks are now there. You can then find them, find the information about them. So lots of things that couldn't be found or didn't produce sensible results has been fixed, and it's all thanks to Steph. So it's a nice shiny new box that's there, and that got shipped this morning. So thanks to Steph for getting that out the door.
It is we've got a lot of information on our docs, and finding information can sometimes, when you've got that amount of information, finding it can be difficult sometimes. So the search working the way it does this morning was just like a breath of fresh air. It really does. I was doing a search last week. I used this example. I was doing a search last week, and I used the exact same search today, and it came up with the result at the top. Last week, it didn't even come up with the result at all. So that for me was like, okay, because people ask questions sometimes, and there's a lot of options in Chocolatey CLI. So we have to jump into a doc sometimes. Like, I have used that option in such a long time. What does it do again? So we've got to search for that sometimes ourselves. And that's what I was searching for this morning. So it was remembered arguments. Because it's such a long option name that I always forget what it actually is.
Yes. With lots of options there in terms of what you can do. So yeah,
it's fantastic.
A great addition. Yes, absolutely. So that's all I wanted to say. That's all I had.
Cool. Okay. All right, so we're going to kind of close up now. We're a couple of minutes over. So as we kind of said, we'll be releasing the additional beta versions of Chocolatey products soon as we move closer towards a general release that includes the support for Nougat V3 Foods and .NET 4.8. If you install the software and can provide feedback, as Gary showed you, there's a GitHub discussion for that. We really appreciate any feedback you can give us on that GitHub discussion. And, we can point to it in the release notes as well. It is pointed to in the release notes as well. So thank you, Gary, for being my co-host today and taking us through those demos. Finally, anything to say before we finish? Definitely nothing. Sure. Okay. Gary spoke enough. So thank you as well to you for watching this today. Please follow us on Twitch and subscribe with the bell on YouTube, and you'll get notifications when we stream. Join us on Discord and follow us on Twitter, Mastodon, LinkedIn, and Facebook. You can find those links at the bottom of our homepage, chocolatey.org. Our next community coffee break is on the 20th of April at 4 p.m. UTC. And watch out for the social media announcements on that. And our next product spotlight will live stream is actually on the 4th of May as well at 4 p.m. UTC. So we hope to see you then. Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.